First of them is going to be Jack Birmingham, who is reading his poem, Who Done It? Jack, come on up. Everybody please give Jack a round of applause.
Thanks, everyone. This one's called Who Done It? 5 suspects, all walks of life, gathered in the study. A knife is placed upon the table, the blade is stained and bloody. The millionaire is on the floor, he's still and has no breath. Someone must find the culprit who put this man to death. 5 men and women, like you and me, gathered in a room. Who could it be? The butler, perhaps? The one who always does it? It's said he had an alibi that was airtight, or was it? He waited hand and foot to serve the millionaire's every need, but his envy was a warning the master would have done well to heed. The doctor, his friend from school, a man who saved his life, it's suspected that there was a grudge, harbored hate and strife. A medic who shall do no harm, who treated him during his ailing, it's rumored the millionaire invested in his clinic, which was failing. Could it have been the businessman, a rather snobbish bore? It's said that they were business partners, but the millionaire wanted more. He took the money, he fled the town, and left his friend with debts. Did this man wield the blade and kill with no regrets? What about his daughter, a high-rolling queen of dice? She had a fondness for games of chance. She found herself enticed. The millionaire was her backer, and she was racking up a debt. But if he was out of the picture, there was an inheritance to get. Then there's the professor, a woman of great renown from a respectable college, a living encyclopedia, the embodiment of knowledge. She and the dead man once were friends, close as turtle doves. But we don't know if she held the knife, because she's wearing gloves. The detective's on the scene, he's combing the study for clues. He's trying to pick out the murderer through these visual cues. And he thinks he's solved the mystery, he's pieced together the bits. He's identified the killer, he can't confirm it's.
All right, thank you, Jack. All right, next up we have Rishi, who I only met this morning, but she did her poem first period, and I thought it was fantastic, and her poem is Mother. Come on up, and you can introduce it, do a better job than I did. All right, thanks.
Thank you so much for having me here. I'm Rishi, I'm a junior, and I'll be presenting my piece, 74 miles per hour. It was written in the memory of John V. Kandula, a 23-year-old Seattle grad student who was killed by a Seattle police officer who ran over her going 74 miles per hour in a residential area. So words. Only 26 letters in the English language form over 200,000 words. When I was in 5th grade, I read the dictionary cover to cover, drinking in word for word, because the melanin in my skin seemed to scream illiterate to the outside world. Because even if I've read the dictionary cover to cover, reciting spellings and definitions like a devoted lover, I'll still be stupid because epitome is pronounced epitome. Because even if I spend hours studying the way words weave themselves into the stories of my ancestors who spoke in a tongue foreign to me today, the way my words waddled aimlessly in my mouth, tearing themselves up on the tip of my tongue, cried that I will never be enough. Because why would the crisscrossing of inked words show on dark skin? The world screams and calls me illiterate because even if I learn all the estimated 200,000 words in the English language, only 2 will suffice to define people like me. Limited value. She was a daughter, a student, a person, a 23-year-old Indian girl with dreams and a passion, a person with the name John V. Kandula. She was killed by a car, a drunk police officer, going 74 miles per hour in a residential area. Just write a check, $11,000. Because to them, her blood and flesh and hopes and dreams and all the memories she had with her loved ones and all the memories she hoped to make in a lifetime were worth less than what you'd make 1 year on minimum wage. And I watched as the world moved on without a sound because she was only one of the many instances of collateral damage in this great country. Words fail me because our shed blood is only as important as a passing Instagram story. Words fail me because if we both are the same and yet somehow different, because if she had limited values, so do I. Words fail me because somehow we don't have the privilege of being individuals. Words fail me because how can they come out of a mouth choking on a world's worth of poison, naming us a nameless, faceless monolith as if we don't feel love or joy or hope, as if our hearts are filled with greed and as if our stomachs don't feel hunger. As if our parents don't hold us close at night and promise they'll give us whatever they can salvage from this broken world. As if they don't have the right to. As if our people still aren't crawling their way out of the wreck of colonization. As if we're just statistics and scraps of a pie chart and not living, breathing humans with flesh and blood that long for a spot at the table that we helped build. As if we aren't human. And I find myself stumbling over my words rather than my feet and feeling the heaviness of English textbooks in my stomach as my R's start rolling as they tumble down my throat, threatening to tear up my flow. And objectives, or was it adjectives? And propositions, perhaps prepositions, dance in front of my eyes and out of reach. And I can't see as I drown inside your sea of preconceptions and prejudice, because how can I find my sea legs when I'm already sinking heart deep in your quicksand of hate? I hope the world knows that I've given it my all, because when I look at my own face, I see a stranger. I don't know who I am or what I stand for, because when you're the American daughter of 2 Indian immigrants and the Indian immigrant among your American friends, you don't know where to stand or where even to stumble. Because if you misstep, misspeak even once, you suddenly don't belong. Because if you misstep once, you could find yourself in the path of hatred, because you are a mere silhouette in the headlights of a drunk police officer's speeding car. And then you start to lose hope because words fail you so loud you can't scream for help, even in the quietest of voices, as the pedestrian crossing blinks mockingly at you because you aren't white enough to be seen in the dark. Words fail me, and I fail to hope. But here's the thing about hope. She's not a fragile porcelain doll. She's bruised knuckles and broken teeth, spitting out blood and standing up on scraped up knees, ready to fight once again. Hope isn't butterflies and rainbows. Hope is the flightless bird that sings like a canary in a coal mine in hopes that her broken wings aren't torn off. Because my words are laced with despair and bruises and scars, but more than them, hope. The endless stream of hope that feeds off the heat in my boiling blood so the fire in my chest doesn't burn me alive. So I continue to speak and sing and breathe shamelessly, unapologetically, and feel love and joy and hope, because no matter how much they dehumanize us, I will still have my soul dancing in my blood, declaring how brazenly human I am, even when it is spilled. And I continue to write and use the very words that cut deep and make me bleed, because I know my words will survive me better than the system could ever protect me, even if I'm hit by a police car going 74 miles per hour in a residential area. Thank you.
All right, so the different poem than what I thought she was going to do, but it was also great, so thank you. And let's give both Rishi and Jack another round of applause. I love it when students get up here to share their work. Thank you both very much. All right, that brings us to our main act for the period. A former English teacher, now turned PE teacher. I'm assuming because there are fewer essays to grade in PE, but you can explain that. Was that it?
Basically,
yeah, okay. This LHS staff member is no stranger to stories or storytelling competitions, and we get to hear all about it. Please welcome Mrs. Megan Lavery. I don't know if this is a clicker. Is this a clicker for slides?
yes.
Back? Okay.
Perfect.
All right, here you go.
Hello. I see a lot of familiar faces in here. My name is Meg Lavery, and I am a health and PE teacher. It's interesting to be standing here at Writers Expo because this was a part of my life for so long as an English teacher. And now as a PE teacher, I feel like students have a different view of what a PE teacher is versus what an English teacher is. And I've kind of been living in that dichotomy of athlete versus creative my whole life. So when Mr. Tooley asked if I would come speak, I thought I would be telling a story because that's kind of what I do. And I found out a few days ago I was doing a little bit more. I was presenting about storytelling. So I'm just going to be very honest with all of you that I've never been to Writers Expo. This is my first year at Libertyville High School, and so I'm doing something that's super scary to me to stand up here and talk to all of you about something I'm passionate about, but also in a format that I've never been a part of. So thank you for listening and paying attention and being a part of this, and thank you to the two young authors who shared their words with us before me. So I'm gonna kind of break it down into a little bit of my background, a little bit about personal storytelling and what that is and why we need it so much, and why I believe it is one of the most important things that as a society can keep us together. And then also the competitions that I do, which is called the Moth, and other storytelling opportunities that you guys could be a part of if you wanted to. Okay, so this is me. I'm going to talk a little bit more about what Story Slams and the Grand Slam are in the third part of my presentation. But I am on a podcast for the Moth, and one of the weirdest things, I know 1.6 million views in the scheme of things isn't a ton, but I literally woke up one morning and I had students in my PE class saying, you were on my TikTok today. So that was something that I had not experienced before. The Moth has a pretty big social media presence, and it was kind of cool to just see a story that I felt was very important. It was a message that adults needed to hear, go viral. And then that's me with my cup of ambition. So to start, does this come out? I want to walk around. To start, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about my history as a kid and how I really struggled with being creative and also being an athlete, because I didn't think that I could be both. And if you get anything from what I'm going to say today, just know that you don't want to pigeonhole yourself into one identity. Right now in high school is a time where you get to explore a lot of things. So I would encourage you to take a chance and do something that's maybe a little bit out of your comfort zone. Join a club that you might not have joined because you thought maybe you weren't good at it or you weren't sure if you like it. You don't know who you are right now. So take the time to figure that out. When I was young, one of the best things that I had, because we didn't have our phones, was to sit in my room and read the lyrics on albums, because records were all we had back then. It wasn't just something vintage and cool. That was literally the option I had to listen to music other than the radio. So I would lay on my floor and I would read through the lyrics of songs, and my dad had this rule that we didn't have to help clean if we were reading, and I felt like reading lyrics should be considered reading. When I was in second grade, I won a state award for a story that I wrote called The Ballerina That Couldn't Dance. And I also was published in this Sunday insert that was a nationwide thing in the paper called Penny Whistle Press. I wrote a poem about Halley's Comet. In 5th grade, I won a talent show for writing a rap about all of the history topics we had learned that year. In middle school, we had the abacus of texting and DMs. It was basically, we would write notes to our friends on paper in cursive and fold them up and give them to them in the hallway, and then they would read them in their classes. We also had kind of a group chat version of that, where we had a notebook that we passed around to 4 of our best friends. We would write in it, and that was how we communicated with each other in the school day. Then in 8th grade, my mom passed away, and my writing went from being more social to being something that was a survival skill for me to help me get through that time. I found a lot of comfort in journaling about what I was thinking and feeling, and so my writing became very personal. When I was in high school, I took an AP Rep class, and my teacher, gave me good feedback. She said, you should take this creative writing class that I teach, and I was like, I think this lady just wants me to be in her class so that there's enough students that they can make the class run. I really didn't believe her feedback. Despite all of these things, I was in high school as an athlete. That was my identity. I loved writing, but I wouldn't have called myself creative. I didn't join any clubs like speech or debate or creative writing. I didn't do anything to foster this thing that is clearly present in my life from a really young age, because athletes didn't do these things. I had a Division I scholarship. I played softball. That's what I did. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school. In the community where I grew up, being an athlete came with a lot of perks. The people in the community knew you, you were in the newspaper, your social group was cool kids. Like, I had what I wanted and needed from athletics, and so that was my identity. I went to college and I ended up majoring in English, mostly because when I sat with my academic advisor, I was unsure what I wanted to do, and the 2 majors that required the fewest math classes were psychology and English. And I was more worried about not having to take advanced math classes than I was about what I actually wanted to be or do. So I did end up majoring in English, and even with writing all of the time in my major, it still didn't sink into me that this was something that I was good at and that I liked, because I was playing softball. My world, my friends, my roommates, everybody that I was associated with in college was an athlete. And so that maintained my identity as an athlete. When I first started telling stories, it was kind of like it wasn't intentional. It was only about 6 years ago. I was at a music festival thing in North Carolina, and some lady came up to me and said, "Hey, we're having a storytelling competition, and we really need people to go. Would you be interested?" And I was like, okay, sure. So I went back to my little tent, wrote a story. I made a friend do it too. We went to the storytelling competition. I told a story, and I won. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, I was on stage, people were cheering. I'm somewhat introverted, so the fact that I was excited about having attention was really different for me. And I started to immerse myself in the storytelling world when I came back to Chicago, and I had no idea that it exists, that there are these amazing people who've lived these incredible lives, people from all races, genders, backgrounds, come together to talk about their lived experiences. Now, I grew up in Central Illinois, so I have a different background than many of you, but I feel like oftentimes we get caught in our own bubbles of people and friends. And it's really hard, even when you want to break out of that, to meet other people and actually become friends and develop relationships with them. And storytelling was a way that happened for me. Steve Jobs, who's arguably one of the most influential people of our time, says that the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation that is to come. You guys spend a lot of time on visual stories. But from hieroglyphics to Snapchat stories, it's not a coincidence that they're called stories. We are created and wired to share about our lives and learn about other people. Now, the format has shifted throughout the generations, but it is still very much a part of all of us. I know that I've spent way too much time watching TikTok videos because of the first couple of lines that someone says, and then I'm sucked in. TikTok is simply people telling stories most of the time. And it's not a surprise to any of us that the world that we live in right now, there's a lot of polarization, there's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of extremes and disagreements and judgments. And the thing that can break that down easier, better than anything else is stories. When you know someone's story, when you hear their experience, there is a bridge that is built. It's when you make a generalization about somebody and you're like, well, but not my friend, because you know their story. And when you make those generalizations, you still are unfortunately encompassing your friend. But a lot of times we have these broad thoughts and feelings, but not about the people that we know and love that fit in those categories. Stories change people's perceptions. They change their biases. The quickest path between yourself and another person is a story. We all want people to know who we are. We all want to have friendships that are deep and meaningful. I read something the other day that said, people have 1,000 followers online or people commenting and liking their things, but they don't actually have someone that will come take care of their cat when they're on vacation. Because we are creating a climate of superficial connection. We need someone that can come bring us soup when we're sick or take care of our dog when we need to go somewhere. We don't need people to simply comment on our pictures. Storytelling is a way that people can relate to each other, and stories have long been used as a way to get people thinking about viewpoints beyond their own, as well as to express our experiences to each other. One of the things I like about public, oral, true storytelling is you're just listening. You're going to an event, you're listening to someone tell a moment of time, something that was important or impactful to them, something that was so meaningful that they're willing to stand on a stage and be vulnerable and talk about it. And all you have to do is listen. You don't have to be awkward and try to talk back. You don't have to try to engage with other people. You're simply taking in their story from their experience. And I don't know another format where we get exposed to something that simple, but that powerful. I've learned from some of my storytelling friends, undocumented immigrants, about their stories living in the United States. I've learned the medical journeys of people who've endured terrible diagnoses and the way that they've evolved through that. I've heard about people's childhood trauma. I've heard about people winning the lottery. It's not just sad things. It's important, meaningful events on someone's timeline. And the cool thing about public, personal, true storytelling is you don't even have to do a lot of thinking. You're not writing a story that you're making up. You don't have to come up with a setting. You don't have to come up with the characters. They already exist in your memories. It's the things that you've experienced and that you've lived through. So the plot, purpose, people, and place already exist. When you take the idea that everything that you're experiencing in a day and doing could be a part of a story, it changes the way that you are in a moment. We, and me included, can be so distracted by our phones that I miss so many things that are happening. It's not something I'm proud of about myself, but it is a part of something that I am in with society and all of you. And when I take the time to stop and pull back and observe and realize that I am in a moment in an unfolding story, it changes my dynamic. I have a notebook, I write things down, and bless you all, but yes, teaching freshmen all day gives me some material. You guys are funny people. So, what is personal storytelling? This, I'm sure you've heard from your English teachers forever, ever, about what makes a good story and why. These are basic components of a good story, but specifically a story that is personal and true. So stories are about people. You don't want to talk about people in generalities. You want to talk about the specific person. My daughter, my friend Tom, my coach. You want to talk about the specific people in your story as people. People in your story have to want something. So whether it's you or someone else, the people in your story are working towards some goal. Stories need to be fixed in time and place. Now you can move back and forth, which a lot of good stories do. It starts at something in the present. One of the stories I talk about, or one of the stories I've told, is about the year that I ran the Chicago Marathon on the day that I turned 39, which is the year that my mom died. She didn't get to have a 39th birthday. So I wanted to do something really hard. And I thought, well, I'm not really a runner, I'll run the Chicago Marathon. And so my story is about running the Chicago Marathon, but it's also going back in time, thinking about the lessons that I learned having grown up without a mom. Also, let your characters speak for themselves. You want to do dialogue, okay? Important things that people say, you want to make it be dialogue. You don't want to tell what they said. You want to actually use their words. Audience is bored easy, okay? So you're at a storytelling event, there's like 10 people going. By the time the 8th or 9th person is up, I'm like done. So you want your story to have, even if it's a sad story, you want to have some humor in there. You want to have some surprise elements that keep people engaged. You also want to use language that people understand. If I stood up here and talked in teacher terms about BLTs and IEPs and 504s and started using language that teachers are familiar with, it would not hold weight with the general audience. It might for teachers, but that's it. So you want to make sure if you're writing about something specific, if you do martial arts, that you are using language that everyone can understand. Stories stir up emotions. Just listening to the poems here. That's what writing is supposed to do. It is supposed to touch the emotions in all of us. And sharing your experience is no different. Stories don't tell, they show. I know you've all heard this 1,000 times from your teachers. And there's usually some like aha moment or moment of truth. The thing, the turning point, the climax, whatever you want to call it. It's the moment where the audience is waiting to see what happens. And then there's clear meaning. So there's a reason that you're telling this story. There's a reason that of the thousands of billions of moments in your life, this is one that you chose to share and write about. These are specific moth criteria. So the moth is a storytelling competition that is hosted by NPR, which is National Public Radio. National Public Radio is broadcast across the country, and every week they have something called the Moth Radio Hour. And they go to local cities around the country and they record storytelling shows, storytelling competitions, and they put them on the radio and they put them on the podcast. But the Moth storytelling competitions, like, you're trying to win. Mr. Schmidt said that he went to a Moth and he put his name in the hat, but he didn't get called. So this is the way that the Moth works. You go. They're hosted all over the city, Lincoln Hall, Evanston Space. There's one in Berwyn at Fitzgerald's, the Athenaeum Theater. They're all in like greater Chicagoland or close suburbs. There's a theme. So some of the themes might be like hot mess. And so you have to write a story that fits the theme of hot mess. And that can be a lot of things. One of the themes I wrote about was chemistry. You can take the theme of chemistry and make it fit something like academic. You can make it fit something romantic. You can make it fit something in sports. So the themes are very broad, and it is your job to convey through your story how it fits that specific theme. You have to have some stakes. You need to make sure that what you're saying is meaningful to you. You don't want to stand up and tell a story that like, okay, great, why did you tell me that? You just wasted my 5 minutes of my time, 10 minutes of my time. You want the audience, when you're done, to sit and talk to the person next to them about what you said and why it's meaningful. You want to have a good first line. So that catch, getting people in with any type of writing is super important. And then what not to do. You don't want to meander at the end. A lot of people will tell this like very riveting story and then they try to like lecture you about why it was important. Your story should give the reason it's important. You shouldn't have to explain why your story was important. The story should do that. It's not stand-up. Love stand-up. There is a time and a place for good stand-up, but storytelling is not a stand-up routine. You're not ranting. So you're not like going on a tangent about something that really bothers you. That's for other outlets. You're not writing an essay either. So when you story tell, first of all, you don't have a paper in front of you. You're not reading it. You're telling a story from your memory live in front of people. Writing essays are great, but that's not what storytelling is. And the reason that that can be a little scary, kind of scary, is because sometimes things that you say that you think are going to be great and people are going to laugh at, or people are going to be moved by, or you're going to hear someone be like, yeah, they don't do that. You're like, crap, okay, what do I do now? Because like I have 3 more places in my story where something like that is going to be said, and I really thought it was going to land with the audience, and it's not. So you're kind of shape-shifting your story to put emphasis on things that the audience is responding to. And then obviously you want to be considerate. If you're doing dialogue, which is important, you want to make sure that you are not trying to mimic someone else's accent, that you are not including any of these important things in your story. We're not trying to bring hate or shame on any group of people. Now, why do you guys need stories? Other than, I think, community building and understanding each other as a society, if we have any hope left, that is the preeminent thing. But for you specifically, you need stories to build relationships. You're in high school. Some of these friendships will be the most enduring friendships that you will have for the rest of your life. But outside of that, I just sat in the college center and talked to them while I was waiting for second period to be over. And we talked about personal essays and personal statements and college interviews and job interviews and how everything is shifting to like, how are you unique? Why do we want you specifically, Megan Lavery, at our college, working at our workplace? How do you tell your story in an essay or an interview so that you're the one who gets the job or gets accepted? You're going to be crafting your personal stories and statements if you haven't already, and you need to have a good story. You need to have a compelling story. You need to be thinking about the things in your life that are making you who you are. For my process of writing, I talked about how there's a theme, so I always have to consider that first. I mine for stories, so I'll just make a list of things that I think might relate to the theme. And I go from there and try to figure out which one I think will work best. I also think about messages. So when I was in my first Moth Grand Slam, there's about 2,000 people there. I came in second by 0.1. It was super disappointing. The best advice I got from a friend was, when are you gonna ever have 2,000 people listening to you? You write a story with a message that you want 2,000 people to hear. And so that's what I did. And my first Grand Slam story was about school lockdown drills. When they first started happening in my school, I was a middle school teacher in 2008. There had just been a shooting at Northern Illinois University, and we had not had lockdown drills before. Kids didn't know what they were. You guys have come up in a society where you know that. They didn't. And if you have Mr. Murchison as a teacher, he was in my 7th grade class as a student when we did this. So the story is actually about his advanced language arts class at Grays Lake Middle School. I go through the dialogue that I think is important. Now, do I really remember everything that someone said 10 years ago? No, but I remember the gist of it. So you do have some freedom to kind of craft what your dialogue is going to be. And then I read it. I write it and I read it out loud and I record myself and I listen to myself and I'm like, ew, I don't like that part. Or I need to do more of this here. Because it is somewhat of a performance. I'm reading what I wrote, it really happened to me, but I'm also going to be telling it and performing it in a way. It's different than reading a script. This happened to me. I have feelings and emotions behind it that are real. Then I make any changes or timing, I have friends and family listen to it, and I just practice it until I learn it. Because even when I stand on stage and try to tell something that happened to me, there are times where I'm like, oh, what comes next? Okay, so practicing and rehearsing is super important. Some of the things that I've gotten to do because of storytelling, just in the past 6 years. Just last Wednesday, I was in Springfield, testifying in front of the Education House Committee about paying student teachers a stipend. Because of my storytelling, our representative, Laura Favor-Diaz, invited me to come speak on behalf of this bill that was being presented to them. And so that's a picture of me in front of the House Committee, and that's because of storytelling. These are some of the competitions down here. I'll explain how those work in just a second. I was invited to Ragdale, which is an artist retreat in Lake Forest. Rebecca Mackay, some incredible creative writers, thinkers, dancers, artists have done work there, and I got to go and be a part of that. I'm an Illinois policy fellow, so I get to work on legislation and write bills about things that I think are important in education. That became because someone saw me storytelling and talked to me about it. I was a part of a women's backpacking retreat. I got to go lead journaling and writing, creative writing for a group of women who had some pretty serious trauma. And there was an organization that sponsored them to go out in nature and backpack and go through waterfalls so that they could be empowered. And I got to be a part of that. Great stories are in this room. Great stories are in all of you. And I hope that you will tell your story, whether it's to your friends, whether it's more publicly, whether it's to yourself in your journal, that you are writing and thinking about who you are, the things that you experience, what they mean to you, and how they're shaping you as an individual. This is just a screenshot I took off of a local, I Googled Chicago area storytelling events last night. This is a calendar that has storytelling events in the area. You can see that just this week, how many storytelling events there are in the Chicago area. There was one last night in Libertyville. Do Not Submit is an open mic opportunity, so it's not even just storytelling. You can read poems, you can read something you wrote, you can get up and talk, you can do whatever you want. It's an open mic, and it's at the Parch Pub, and it happens, I think, once a month. So that's something super close. There's no pressure, there's no judging, it's just an open mic and people listening. I'm going to talk just quickly about the moth, and then I'll ask if you guys have any questions. So the way that the moth works, and this is what I do, is you go to an event, you put your name in a hat, and then they have this big bag with everyone's names in them, and they pull out a person and they go first. So they have to go up to the mic and tell their story. Meanwhile, they've picked out groups of people in the audience to be the judges. So these aren't professionals, they're just people. And at the end of your story, they hold up cards and they give you a score. And then they pull the second person, and the second person goes up to tell the story. So you don't know that you're gonna tell the story. You don't know when you're gonna tell the story, and you could go with a story and put your name in the hat and not even get to go up, because there's generally 30 to 40 to 50 people, depending on the location. If you win the story slam, you then get to go on and compete at the Grand Slam, which is the winner of the monthly story slam. So every month there's a story slam. All 12 of those winners come together for the Grand Slam in Chicago. It's at a big theater, and you compete against all of the winners. So it's kind of like the best of the best. That is what a Grand Slam is. There's one happening this weekend on Saturday. And I think that's really all I have to say about storytelling. I really just want to emphasize that if you think you are something and creative is not one of them, look deeper, because you are all creative, you all have ways that you can express yourself, and you all have stories to share. Does anyone have any questions? Nada? Anything? Okay. Mr. Tooley, it's the dead audience here. Thank you. So I printed out a story, but I would have to read it because I don't have one memorized or rehearsed to do today. What, you want me to do that? Okay. Oh, okay.
2 minutes, yeah.
2 minutes. I don't know that I can do it in 2 minutes. I'll do my best. I'll go quickly.
Or you could just tell us about the opening line and how you thought through that if you wanted to.
Okay, yeah. So I'll start it, and then I'll just kind of give you a background of how that's where I decided to start the story. It says, so I was sitting on a metal stool in front of my desk, holding a copy of Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, when the corner of my eye, I saw my janky metal blinds, the ones that never really closed all the way, like weird shadows or figures. But before I could process what I was seeing, I heard over the intercom, "We are in a full building lockdown." Repeat, "We are in a full building lockdown." And I ran to the door, pulling it shut with one hand and ushering my students to get up, move against the counters, and sit down with the other hand when the pounding started on the windows. So I started my story in the center of the action, which is the beginning of the drill. I didn't know the drill was happening. Back in the day, they had this idea that we needed to be prepared for like real life active shooters. So we would have drills that nobody knew if they were real or if there was actually a threat. So you couldn't like look at your teacher and be like, "No, this is just drill, we're good." I was terrified. I was terrified that I didn't lock my door from the outside because that's what we were supposed to do. And my students were looking at me like, what is happening right now? They had never had a shooter drill. They started banging on our windows, all the way down the windows. That's it. All right, thank you.